Brand new teacher came to her middle school classroom early and set out all the textbook on each student's desk along with pencils and paper. Then the teacher stood at the door, greeting each and every student as they entered. But then the unthinkable happened. Hello, I am MrsPTarleton. Let's take a look at a real-life new teacher experience from the traumatic beginning, happy middle, to the very sad ending of the school year. Let's learn from this teacher's experience. So after the new teacher had worked so hard to be sure all was set up perfectly, the teacher stood at the door greeting each student with a warm welcome, because that is what they were taught in all their teacher training courses. After all the students entered the classroom, the teacher turns to look around the classroom to see students had thrown all the books and supplies onto the floor and rearranged all the desks. The new teacher stood looking on in horror and shock. What is a teacher to do? All the students were talking, putting on makeup, and completely not listening to the new teacher. Now, the new teacher had learned that there is no way to talk over 30+ students, so raising their voice was futile. But what should they do? Teacher credentialing did not prepare them for this. So like any respectable teacher who had been through teacher training would do, they pressed on and began to teach the lesson, because after all, standards in teaching bell to bell were very important. The new teacher hoped that maybe things would be different when the next class arrived, and maybe it was just a bad group in the first period. Sadly, the new teacher was wrong. The new teacher was strong and courageous and pressed on, doing this routine 5 periods a day for a whole week. At the end of the week, the new teacher was so exhausted and in tears, thinking this may not be the career for them. During the credentialing program, the teacher had read Harry Wong's book, but it seemed none of these strategies were working with the students this new teacher had encountered. Doing a quick internet search, the teacher came across the book by Fred Jones called Tools for Teaching. The new teacher immediately purchased that book and began frantically reading the book. It was a very easy-to-read book with so many realistic situations and images that she could relate to. Not only was the book chock full of realistic scenarios, it had some clear guidelines on how to solve the problem. After the first week, the new teacher knew they could not continue the way they were going and immediately did a hard reset of their classroom. This included immediately taking control the following week. As students entered the classroom, the teacher handed out 3x5 cards with the students' new seating assignment. Now remember the previous week and how everything ended up on the floor? The new teacher had learned, and as she let in a few students, the new teacher watched to be sure the students were following the directions. If a student was not following the directions and entering the classroom quietly, it was a simple point to the student and then point back outside and tell the student to try again. This allowed students who did not enter the classroom appropriately to practice and do it again. The new teacher followed these steps outlined in Fred Jones' book, and surprisingly, the students responded positively. Seemed the students realized the teacher meant business and they were not going to get away with their disruptions. In one instance, the new teacher had a student try entering the classroom quietly again, and the student went out and re-entered, this time not talking but slamming their backpack very loudly on the desk. The teacher did not get upset, but instead kept with the Queen Victoria look as Fred Jones suggested and pointed to the student and said again. Student fussed all the way to the door, saying they didn't do anything wrong and they were not even talking. Like, what's wrong with you, teacher? The teacher continued with the Queen Victoria look as the student went back out and again slammed the backpack on the desk. The new teacher became a little concerned and wondered if just maybe Fred Jones was wrong. But then something magical happened. The new teacher observed the student enter the classroom very quietly, and then the most shocking thing happened. The student put both of their hands under their backpack and set the backpack down very slowly and gently, not making the slightest of sounds. This made the new teacher smile and sighed, not only had this proven that the student knew exactly what they were doing wrong without the teacher ever having to even explain what was wrong, but that Fred Jones had this stuff all figured out. The new teacher continued with Fred Jones' strategies, and the classes were very productive. Does that mean that the new teacher could let their guard down? Absolutely not. The students were continually watching the new teacher, and if there was a glimpse of the teacher not meaning business, the students would start to take advantage. This was confirmed when one day the students decided to test the new teacher and began heckling her. The students had been doing so well it caught the new teacher off guard at first. But the new teacher quickly referred back to her mental notes made from reading Fred Jones' book and stood with the Queen Victoria look, not saying a word to the students who were misbehaving. Now, if you are not familiar with the Queen Victoria look, it is a very stoic look showing no expression. At one point, the teacher felt a very slight twitch to her lip, as the students were seriously annoying the teacher. To the teacher's surprise, a few students shouted out with glee, "We are getting to her. Did you see her lip twitch?" What? The new teacher thought. The new teacher was shocked. How in tune the students were to notice this ever so slight twitch of her lip. At that moment, the teacher knew that students were watching her every move, and if for 1 minute she was not meaning business, the students would see that. The teacher continued rereading Fred Jones' book every now and again throughout the year and continued to implement more and more strategies listed in the book. The school year went so smoothly that even the administrator was shocked at how the new teacher was able to have their students so well behaved and working so hard in the classroom. Now, truth be told, the students were considered the lowest of the low, both academically and behaviorally. Sadly, a few of them had ankle monitors and probation officers. Another student even had a 2-year-old child. The students had always been labeled the bad kids, but this new teacher was able to go in and implement Fred Jones' strategies and built such a loving, strong relationship with these students who really needed someone who cared enough to set up boundaries for them. Using all of Fred Jones' strategies allowed the new teacher to have their best school year ever. But then there came the sad ending. As the school year wound to a close, the teacher knew they would never see this group of 8th graders again, as they would be moving on to high school. So as the teacher bid them farewell and said goodbye, she looked away for a moment, and the students quickly called out the teacher saying, "You're gonna miss us. We can see the tears in your eyes." Those students were absolutely right, and I know this because I was that new teacher 15 years ago. No other class will ever top that class. It was the best year ever, all thanks to Fred Jones. Thank you, Mr. Fred Jones.